Hello and welcome to another new episode of A Brief History Spooky Season. Today, we're traveling to a duplex in Southington, Connecticut, to a home that was formerly a funeral parlor. A family of 8 moved into the first floor and basement of the duplex home and seemed to immediately become plagued with violent attacks, unexplainable phenomenon, and a complete change in the personality of their oldest son, who was being treated for Hodgkin's lymphoma. This is a brief history of the Snedeker Family Haunting. As always, this episode of A Brief History may contain graphic content and is not suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Today, we are building the Snedeker home from the 1980s in The Sims 4, based off only exterior reference photos. Our story begins in 1986, when the Snedeker family, consisting of parents Carmen and Alan, along with their 3 sons, a daughter, and 2 nieces, moved into a rental duplex in Southington, Connecticut. The choice of location and house were important to the Snedekers, whose eldest child, Philip, had been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. The family made the choice to move to Southington, Connecticut from upstate New York, based on proximity to Philip's doctors, wanting to be close by for safety and also monetary reasons. Upon rental of the home, the owner at the time who lived upstairs, Daryl Kern, states that he had informed the family about the history of the home. The white colonial-style house located at 208 Meriden Avenue had been used as a funeral home for multiple decades until it was purchased by Kern. But if you speak to Carmen Snedeker, she claims that she was never informed of the history of the house, and instead found out that they were living in a former funeral home after moving in and finding mortuary equipment in the basement. Despite finding it horrifying that the home they were to be living in was once used as a funeral home, the family moved in anyway, with the 2 teenage boys taking the basement room, the only room seemingly big enough for them, but also the only room next to what was formerly the mortuary. The occurrences started off innocently enough, with the mother of the family, Carmen, seeming to be the first to experience anything upon moving into the house. Carmen began noticing that things around the home would be moved or go missing entirely. In more than one instance, Carmen claimed to have set the table for dinner, only to leave the room for a moment and come back to find that the dishes had been put back neatly in the cabinets. As the family began to settle into their home, and Philip continued to undergo treatments for his Hodgkin's lymphoma, the instances in the house became scarier and more violent. The children living in the house started talking about a man with long black hair that they had seen moving throughout the house. Lights around the house would flicker or simply turn on and off, even with some having no bulbs in them. The family also experienced other strange and unexplained activity throughout the house. Carmen claims to have been nearly suffocated by a shower curtain, seemingly wrapping itself around her while she was showering. And Philip seemed to have changed overnight. Once a kind teenager, Philip started having drastic mood change, was claiming to see things and people who weren't there, and began attacking family members. After seeing the change in Philip, they brought up the occurrences with his doctor to see if any of the medications he was on could potentially cause the hallucinations, delusions, and mood swings that they were seeing in their son. Doctors confirmed that none of his medications could have those types of side effects, and the family moved on to finding their son a mental health doctor, who diagnosed Philip with schizophrenia. The family, however, disagreed with this assessment and believed that the change in Philip was entirely due to the nature of the house they were living in. After the family eventually left the home, it would come to light that not only did Philip have a drug habit, was diagnosed with schizophrenia, but he also admitted to being involved with some of the occurrences going on around the home. As time went on, things in the house became more concerning, and more violent, with multiple family members claiming to have been raped and sodomized by an unseen force that they claim to be a demon. Carmen alleges that one day while mopping the floor, the bucket of water she was using turned red with blood, and the house began smelling like rotting meat. Philip also attacked and attempted to rape his cousin Tammy, who had been living in the house with them. Philip was removed from the home and put in a psychiatric hold for 45 days. Despite everything going on, the family remained in the home for 2 years, which made the public question if things were actually happening once it was released to the public. Who in their right mind would continue living in a house with these claimed atrocities happening? After a downward spiral of occurrences, the Snedeker family finally called the famed demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren, who took a vested interest in the family and the home. In true Warren fashion, they stayed at the Snedeker home for weeks at a time, attempting to capture any instance of paranormal or demonic activity. After their lengthy investigation, the Warrens claimed that the house was riddled with demonic entities, due to the fact that the previous workers of the funeral home had been practicing necromancy, as well as necrophilia. The Warrens performed an exorcism which cleansed the home of the spirits and demons plaguing the family, and apparently made it safe for them to return. The inclusion of Ed and Lorraine Warren pushed the Snedeker family haunting into the public eye and brought a lot of scrutiny upon the family. Anything involving the Warrens, especially after their gaffes with the investigation of the Amityville Horror House, made the public question the legitimacy of what the family was claiming had happened to them. And in 1992, the family would be even more heavily questioned after receiving a book deal to tell their story. Similar to the Lutz family who had lived at the Amityville house and subsequently lied about the happenings in their home, the Snedekers stood to gain a lot by telling their story, mostly money. Ray Garton, a horror novelist, was approached by Ed and Lorraine Warren to work with the family and write a book telling their story. But Garton quickly turned skeptical when he began interviewing the family members that had been living in the home. The stories didn't line up. Each family member had a different timeline and recollection of what was allegedly happening in the house. Some family members spouted details that other family members would never mention. Garton was rightfully concerned and approached Ed Warren, who replied with, "Oh, they're crazy. You've got some of the story. Just use what works and make the rest up. Just make it up, and make it scary." Garton did what he was told, ignoring conflicting information given to him by members of the Snedeker family and sensationalizing what was claimed to have happened to make the story more interesting and more scary. Since the death of Ed Warren in 2006, many of his former co-authors have come forward to admit that Ed had told them to make up incidents and details simply to create scarier stories. The Snedekers claim to stand by what happened to them, and have profited nicely, not only from their book deal, but documentaries and theatrical release of a movie based on what happened in their home, aptly titled A Haunting in Connecticut, which released in 2002. The Snedekers did eventually move out of the home, and none of the subsequent owners have claimed to be haunted or have experienced anything supernatural or out of the ordinary. Unfortunately, in 2012, Philip Snedeker lost his battle with Hodgkin's lymphoma and passed away. What are your thoughts on the happenings in Southington, Connecticut? Was it just a family with financial problems who sensationalized a creepy backstory on their home for a quick buck? Or did they actually experience what they say they had experienced? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining me for another episode of A Brief History Spooky Season. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content, and be sure to follow me over on TikTok as well. Thank you to my patrons for supporting the channel and this series. You are very much appreciated. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.